Hi everyone. Before we get into this audiobook, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button and drop a like. It helps me out a lot, as well as contributes a lot to the channel. Now, let's get into the story. I hope you enjoy, Ilara faltered, her lungs burning for air. The earthy perfume of the forest floor, mingled with evergreen, only sharpened the acrid taste of anxiety in her mouth. The hunting party, a sinuous wave of muscle and fur, pressed on, their movements fluid and assured. She, as usual, led behind. The doe, plump and promising, had long since dissolved into the verdant maze the chase, foiled by her clumsy gait. A flush of humiliation singed her cheeks. It was a chronic condition, this inadequacy. A guttural growl tore through the stillness, followed by the drumbeat of paws. Jorah, a flint-eyed she-wolf, halted beside her, her muzzle twisted in scorn. "Honestly, Ilara," she rasped, her voice a low thrum of disapproval. "Is that the best you can do? A pup could manage better." Ilara recoiled, her gaze snagging on the gnarled roots beneath her feet. "I'm trying," she mumbled, the words lost in the soughing of the wind. Jorah's derisive snort echoed through the trees. "Trying? The alpha requires strength at his side, not a burden." She stalked away, her words like splinters lodging beneath Ilara's skin. The pack's collective disapproval was a constant undercurrent in her existence, a relentless catalogue of her failings. She was smaller, frailer, more hesitant. Her coat was a mousy brown, a stark contrast to the burnished ebony and silver pelts of her peers. Even her wolf form lacked the imposing stature that demanded respect. She was an outlier, a washed-out sketch next to Torin, their alpha, a magnificent creature whose very aura throbbed with power. She pushed onward, her muscles screaming, the jeers reverberating in her skull. They had a point, she knew. Torin warranted a capable partner, one who could not only stand with him but also guide and protect their own. Not someone who struggled during a simple hunt. Eventually, she stumbled into the clearing where the others had convened. Torin stood at its center, his powerful physique commanding attention. He spoke with Kale, the beta, his tone grave. Ilara hesitated, yearning to approach him, to offer some semblance of an explanation for her shortcomings. But the frigid look in his steely gaze stalled her. He turned, his eyes scanning the pack, before settling on her. There was no tenderness, no affection, merely a detached scrutiny that made her want to vanish. "Ilara," he stated, his voice devoid of inflection. "You hampered the hunt. Again." She lowered her head, shame prickling her skin. "I'm sorry, Torin. I lost my footing." A paltry excuse, and she knew it. He sighed, the sound heavy with disappointment. "You need to cultivate strength, Ilara. As my mate, you are my representative. Your weakness reflects poorly on all of us." His words were a tangible blow, stealing her breath. She longed to convey her desperate efforts, her fervent desire to prove herself worthy. But the words caught in her windpipe, suffocated by the weight of her perceived inadequacies. The watching she-wolves offered a mix of pity and derision. Lyra, a young wolf with a compassionate spirit, offered a fleeting, sympathetic smile, quickly masked as Torin's gaze swept over them once more. The gathering dispersed. Ilara trailed after Torin as they returned to the den. She attempted to close the distance between them, to bridge the widening crevasse, but he remained remote, his body stiff, his focus fixed on the trail ahead. "Torin," she ventured, her voice trembling slightly. "May we converse?" He stopped, but refused to meet her eyes. What remains to be said, Ilara? You are aware of what is expected. But I crave to understand you, she pleaded, her voice cracking. I wish to be more than a mere figurehead at your side. He turned then, a weariness in his expression that startled her. You fail to grasp, Ilara. My burdens are immense. The welfare of the pack takes precedence. I have no time for personal indulgences. His words were sharper than any claw. She was inconsequential, merely an obligation, a duty. The realization settled in her stomach like a lead weight, cold and oppressive. As they entered the den, the whispers commenced. She heard them, despite the efforts to conceal them. Feeble disgrace impediment. The words circled her, a perpetual reminder of her failures. She retreated to the furthest corner of the den, curling into the sparse bedding she had claimed as her own. Torrens settled in his own space, his back to her, radiating an aura of icy detachment. Tears coursed down her face, silent and unchecked. She was alone, utterly isolated, even in the presence of her own mate. The Elfa's shame. Her entire being distilled into those words. The truth of it resonated, sharp and agonizing. Torren watched her from the periphery of his vision, his jaw tight. He knew his words were cruel, that he was inflicting pain. Yet he felt powerless to stop. He was burdened by insurmountable pressure. Discontent stirred within the pack. He had to project a strong image. He thought back to the day he had chosen Ilara. He had been drawn to her gentle nature, her quiet empathy. He had foolishly believed her kindness would serve as a strength, a counterpoint to his own unyielding intensity. But he had been mistaken. Her gentleness was seen as a lack of spine, her empathy as vulnerability. He experienced a sharp pang of guilt, a wave of regret. He hadn't sought to inflict pain. He had only tried to preserve his pack, but his words had wrought their damage. He could see it in her eyes, the extinguishing of hope, supplanted by a bleak, aching resignation. He wanted to embrace her, to offer an apology, but he was the Alpha. He had to remain strong. He couldn't afford to display weakness, not even to his chosen mate. The pack observed, always observing. If he were to falter, they would lose faith. Thus, he remained unmoving, his back turned, his heart consumed by a shame far exceeding hers. He was trapped, shackled by responsibility and pride. And in that moment, he hated himself more than he could ever hate Ilara. He was the architect of her torment, the source of her despair. And he was incapable of preventing it. Public rejection, a palpable tension electrified the air. Torchlight painted the assembled pack in shifting strokes of gold and ebony. The collective anticipation was a tangible force, a resonant hum that vibrated within Ilara's very core. Rooted to the edge of the crowd, the coarse weave of her homespun tunic grated against her skin, a world apart from the luxurious pelts flaunted by the favored few near the center. The aroma of evergreens and burning wood mingled with the sharp, metallic scent of expectation, creating a cloying, oppressive atmosphere. Tonight, the choosing. A tradition as ancient as their lineage. A night for renewing allegiances, forging partnerships, and charting destinies. Ilara should have been at Torren's side, their joined hands a testament to their bond, their combined power. Instead, she was exiled to the fringes, a specter haunting her own existence. Her pulse hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs, like a trapped bird desperate for escape. Above, Torrens stood upon the makeshift stage, the firelight catching the hard planes of his face, sculpting him into an image of implacable authority. His gaze swept over the throng, momentarily grazing Ilara before recoiling, as if from a painful heat. A restless stirring rippled through the pack, each member hungry to witness the Alpha's judgment, to see who would ascend and who would be cast down. Near the platform's base stood Sarah, a glint of predatory triumph in her eyes, her scarlet gown a bold declaration of ambition. Looming behind her, Aemon wore his usual cruel smirk. A few feet from Ilara, Bram offered a small, mournful smile, a meager comfort against the rising tide of despair. She knew what was coming. She had sensed it in the glacial chill of Torrhen's regard, the cavernous distance between them, the way he no longer truly saw her. The Alpha's voice cut through the hushed expectancy, amplified by the stillness. "Tonight," he began, the word resonating with command, "we celebrate the ties that bind us. We honor strength, fidelity, and the future we build together." Ilara steeled herself. Each syllable fell like a stone, each pause tightening the vise around her heart. "As Alpha, I am sworn to safeguard the well-being and prosperity of our people," Torrhen continued, his gaze raking across the assembled wolves. "And that requires difficult choices." A wave of disquiet washed over the crowd. Ilara closed her eyes, a solitary tear etching a trail down her cheek. She tasted the bitterness of abandonment, the corrosive sting of shame. Torrhen inhaled deeply, drawing out the silence until it became a suffocating weight. "Ilara," he declared, his tone devoid of all warmth, "you possess a gentle spirit. But gentleness alone is not enough to sustain us. Resilience is paramount. Unwavering loyalty is indispensable." Ilara's breath caught in her throat. This was it. "Therefore," Torrhen's voice boomed across the clearing, each word a crushing blow, "I must release Ilara from her position as my chosen mate." A collective gasp surged through the pack. Disbelief warred with shock, and a cruel, gleeful satisfaction. Ilara stumbled back, her hand clamping over her mouth to stifle the rising sob. The world tilted and swayed, faces dissolving into a blur of condemnation and pity. "From this night forward," Torrhen proclaimed, his voice ringing with finality, "Ilara will no longer hold standing as my mate. She relinquishes her place within the Alpha's inner circle." The words echoed within Ilara's skull, a thunderous roar that blotted out all other sound. Exposed, defenseless, she stood stripped bare before the judgment of the pack. Humiliation engulfed her, a suffocating wave threatening to drag her under. Then Torrhen turned, fixing his gaze upon Sarah. "I choose Sarah," he announced, his voice firm, resolute. Her fortitude, her shrewdness, her unwavering devotion, these are the qualities that will fortify our pack. Sarah strode forward, a triumphant smirk curving her lips. Her eyes blazed with victory as she ascended the platform, her crimson gown swirling around her like spilled wine. She reached for Torrhen's hand, her fingers entwining with his in a blatant display of possession. Ilara watched, her heart fracturing into shards. It wasn't just the rejection, the public disgrace. It was the shattering betrayal. The realization that Torrhen, the man she had loved, the man she had trusted implicitly, could be capable of such calculated cruelty. Sarah turned to face the pack, her gaze sweeping over them, a silent dare in her eyes. "I will not disappoint you," she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. "I will be the strength you demand, the leader you deserve." Aemon joined her on the platform. Standing just behind her, his face a mask of obsequious devotion. He shot a contemptuous glance in Ilara's direction, his eyes gleaming with malice. Ilara remained frozen, her body numb with disbelief. She felt the collective gaze of the pack upon her, appraising, condemning. She was an outcast, a failure, a pariah. Bram gently took her hand, his touch a lifeline of compassion. "Elara," he murmured, his voice thick with concern. "Come with me. Let me get you away from here." But Elara couldn't move. She was rooted to the earth, paralyzed by the sheer, crushing weight of her despair. She watched Torin and Sarah standing together on the platform, bathed in the worshipful gazes of the pack. They were the embodiment of strength, of power, of everything Elara was not. A lone tear escaped her eye, tracing a path down her cheek and staining the coarse fabric of her tunic. It was a tear of desolation, of disgrace, of utter and irreversible ruin. In that instant, Elara understood that her life had been irrevocably altered. The pack had cast her aside. Torin had discarded her. And she, in turn, had severed her ties to the life she had once cherished. Flight into darkness, Elara bolted, each inhale a scorching rasp against her throat. The forest became a rushing tapestry of emerald and sepia, mirroring the tempest in her soul. Torin's cutting words lingered, precise and cruel. "You are weak." Sarah's gloating visage seared itself onto her memory, spurring her frantic escape. Humiliation pressed upon her like a tangible burden, threatening to buckle her knees. But she refused to yield. Not yet. Tears blurred her vision, turning the path into a shimmering barrage. She tripped over exposed roots, her ankles protesting with sharp stabs of pain, but she pressed onward, driven by a desperate need to outrun the pack's suffocating judgment. The sharp tang of pine and moist earth assaulted her senses, a welcome contrast to the imagined saccharine taste of Sarah's triumph. She ran without destination, only the imperative to flee fueling her, to distance herself from the pitying glances, the whispers that clung like shadows, from the cavernous emptiness in her chest where Torin's affection had once resided. Deeper she ran, the trees thickening, the light dwindling as she approached the edge of the blackwood. A shiver traced its icy fingers down her spine, a primal warning signal. The blackwood, a realm forbidden, a place of ancient, corrupted power. Elders whispered tales of creatures dwelling in the inky depths, of magic that warped and twisted. But Elara remained undeterred. Peril was preferable to the oppressive shame that clung to her skin. She paused at the threshold, the air growing stagnant, the silence heavy and ominous. Decaying leaves carpeted the ground, deadening all sound. The clean scent of pine gave way to a dank, musky aroma, laced with a metallic, faintly disturbing undertone. Summoning a deep breath, she plunged into the umbral depths. The transformation was instantaneous and profound. The temperature plummeted, and the remaining light vanished, consumed by the dense, interwoven canopy overhead. The trees here were ancient grotesqueries, their branches contorted into clawing shapes that reached towards the unseen sky. A preternatural stillness settled upon the land, disturbed only by the occasional scuttle of unseen life. Phantoms of memory rose to haunt her, Torin's joyous cries, reverberating across the training field as they practiced. His hand clasped in hers, firm and comforting, during moonlit strolls. The intensity of his gaze during pack assemblies, a silent pledge of shared strength and adoration. All falsehoods, all a spiteful charade. She pushed onward, tearing through the undergrowth, her skin raked and bleeding. The woods seemed to constrict around her, the trees becoming silent, judgmental observers. She pictured the pack, secure and warm within their burrows, celebrating Torin's decision, congratulating Sarah on her shrewdness. A slow burn of fury ignited beneath the surface of her despair. Fury at Torin for his duplicity, at Sarah for her relentless ambition, at the pack for their unquestioning acceptance. But above all, fury at herself for her perceived weakness, her naivete, her ease of disposal. She needed to endure, to refute their judgment, to prove she was not the frail, pathetic creature they believed her to be. Days and nights bled into one another. She foraged for sustenance, drinking from stagnant pools, seeking refuge in the hollowed trunks of ancient sentinels. The blackwood tested her resilience, pushing her past her breaking point. She warded off ravenous predators, navigated perilous landscapes, and bore the constant ache of hunger and the relentless bite of the cold. The memories persisted, but their nature began to alter. They were no longer solely suffused with affection and warmth. She now perceived the subtle condescension in Torin's expressions, the corrections he offered during training, the barely veiled irritation in his tone when she faltered. She recalled Sarah's sly jabs, her thinly disguised disdain, the way she would subtly belittle Ilara in the presence of others. The truth began to crystallize within her. She had been blinded by love, by a yearning for acceptance, by her desire to please Torin, to integrate into the pack. She had disregarded the warning signs, silenced her instincts, and allowed herself to be molded into their desired image. But no longer. The blackwood was forging her anew. The ceaseless struggle for survival, the solitude, the primal energy of the woods were stripping away her vulnerabilities, revealing a strength she never knew she possessed. She mastered the art of tracking, constructed makeshift shelters, and fought with a ferocity she had never imagined possible. One night, as she huddled beside a meager fire, devouring a rabbit she had trapped, she detected a disturbance in the underbrush. Her senses heightened, her muscles tensed, ready to confront any threat. Two luminous orbs materialized from the darkness. A wolf, larger and more formidable than any she had encountered before. It was naught of her pack. This creature radiated an ancient power, a raw and untamed essence. The wolf circled her, its gaze unwavering. Ilara stood her ground, refusing to display fear. Instinct told her this was a trial. The wolf surged forward. Ilara reacted without conscious thought, her body moving with an unanticipated speed and grace. She evaded the attack, snatched a smoldering branch from the fire, and brandished it towards the animal. The wolf snarled, its fangs bared, but it hesitated, wary of the flickering flames. They circled one another, locked in a silent contest of wills. Ilara knew a direct confrontation would be futile. The creature was simply too powerful, too experienced, but she could outwit it. She feigned an offensive maneuver, then swiftly dropped to the earth, evading the wolf's snapping jaws. As she rolled, she gathered a handful of soil and flung it into the wolf's eyes. The animal howled in pain and shock, momentarily blinded. Ilara seized the advantage. She scrambled to her feet, retrieved a sharp stone from the ground, and charged at the wolf, plunging the stone deep into its flank. The wolf yelped, stumbled backward, and then, to Ilara's astonishment, turned and vanished into the blackness. Ilara stood there, gasping for breath, her body trembling with exertion and adrenaline. She had survived. She had confronted the Blackwood's dangers and emerged victorious. As she gazed into the shadows, a novel sensation washed over her. Not dread, not despondency, but something else entirely. Something akin to hope itself. She was isolated, adrift, and vulnerable, but she was also resilient, a survivor. And she would not be broken. The moon ascended in the heavens, casting elongated, spectral shadows across the forest floor. Elara gazed up at the lunar orb, her eyes gleaming with renewed resolve. She would endure, she would grow stronger, and one day she would return. Not as the frail, pathetic creature she once was, but as something transformed. Something powerful. Something unstoppable. The lunar awakening. Elara crumpled. The brutal ground met her with a stony indifference, a stark contrast to the days of desperate flight. A ravenous emptiness twisted within, a persistent torment eclipsing all else. Sustenance had been a forgotten luxury now. Only the grudging berries of thorny thickets and the fetid water of stagnant pools kept her alive. Her once radiant fur, now a coarse mat, bore the stains of earth and exhaustion. The blackwood had peeled back the layers, revealing the vulnerable creature beneath the wolf. She fought to rise, to press onward, but her body, in a rebellion of exhausted sinew and bone, refused. Then, through blurred vision, a clearing materialized, awash in an unearthly, argent glow. At its heart stood a ruined shrine, a gnoled edifice consumed by the tenacious forest. Ivy tendrils embraced its crumbling pillars, and moss clung to its weathered surface like a velvety shroud. How she'd missed it before remained a mystery, yet its presence resonated, a beacon cutting through her despair. Dragging herself forward, each inch a torment, Elara reached the shrine. A low, vibrant energy thrummed from the cold stone, tingling through her fingertips. Faded carvings depicted wolves baying at a celestial sphere, their forms elongated into ghostly apparitions. Its significance eluded her, yet instinct whispered of power residing here. As she collapsed against the shrine, the sky underwent an eerie transformation. The sun, already dipping below the horizon, faced obliteration. A creeping umbra devoured its fiery visage, the dark orb inexorably swallowing the light. An eclipse, lunar and immense, gripped the blackwood in silent anticipation. The air crackled with an unfamiliar energy, a charged symphony of ozone and starlight, both sharp and exhilarating. The forest floor seemed to pulse, shadows deepening and swirling like sentient phantoms. The eclipsed moon's radiance was not feeble or diminished, but amplified, its otherworldly light bathing the glade in ethereal luminescence. A dizzying wave seized Elara, followed by an intense heat blooming from her core. Bones screamed, muscles convulsed, and a primal shriek tore from her throat, shattering the forest's silence. It was more than pain, it was a sundering, the breaking of something ancient and frail within her. The eclipse's power flooded her, permeating her very essence. A maelstrom of fire and ice, creation and destruction intertwined. She felt her form remaking itself, shifting, reacting to the lunar force. Senses heightened. The scent of pine and damp soil became overwhelming, the rustle of leaves a deafening roar. Vision blurred, then sharpened, revealing microscopic wonders, the intricate architecture of a spider's web, the delicate spores clinging to a mushroom's cap. The world exploded into hyperreality, vibrant and terrifying. A newfound awareness blossomed, a connection to the earth, the moon, the ancient energies coursing through the blackwood. She understood, intuitively, the shrine's carvings, the eclipse's power, her own untapped potential. The metamorphosis was agonizing, yet deeply liberating. It marked the demise of the weak, naive Elara, the genesis of something fierce and primal. The pack's derision, Torin's betrayal, these were not flaws, but catalysts, driving her to this nexus, this apotheosis. As the eclipse peaked, casting the forest in unearthly silver, Ilara's transformation reached its zenith. No longer slumped in defeat, she stood tall, exuding strength. Her fur shimmered with a metallic sheen, her eyes burned with lunar fire, and raw power emanated from her very core. She was no longer just the rejected mate, she was something far more potent. The air around her vibrated. The forest seemed to incline in deference. This was not merely physical, it was a spiritual genesis. The wilderness within had been unleashed, merging with the Blackwood's untamed might. She lifted her head and howled, a resonant cry echoing through the trees, a declaration of newfound strength, a promise of retribution, a yearning for an uncharted destiny. The sound transcended any howl she had uttered before, deeper, richer, infused with lunar magic. As the eclipse waned, the shadows retreated and light returned. Ilara stood transformed. The gnawing hunger had vanished, replaced by a burning purpose. Fear had dissolved, supplanted by unwavering resolve. She no longer fled her past, she charged towards her future. The Blackwood had sought to break her, but instead had reforged her. She was no longer the pack's shame, she was their reckoning. She would return, not as the scorned mate, but as the storm they had unleashed. She took a step, then another, her paws moving with newfound confidence and grace. The forest yielded before her, as if acknowledging her sovereignty. Ilara was no longer adrift. She was home. The wilderness was not a prison, but a sanctuary, a crucible of power and transformation. She would wield that power to reshape her destiny, to reclaim what was rightfully hers, and to leave the pack that had spurned her in the ashes of their hubris. The taste of freedom, exhilarating and sharp, lingered on her tongue. As she melted back into the Blackwood, a faint smile touched her lips. The hunt had begun. Becoming the wild the first moon following the eclipse was a trial. Ilara's senses, heightened and raw, shrieked in protest. Formerly soft rustlings became thunderous booms. The earthy tang of pine, the musk of decaying leaves, and the acrid stench of distant death assaulted her. A suffocating cocktail. Her strength, untamed, surged like a flood threatening to breach its levee. She blundered through the underbrush, constantly snagged by roots that seemed to writhe with malicious glee. Each fallen leaf shattered like brittle glass beneath her weight. One evening, attempting to hunt a rabbit, she pounced, claws extended, only to obliterate the creature in a gruesome display. Warm blood slicked her fur, a wave of revulsion rising in her throat, not from the kill itself, but from the utter lack of control. The feral nature within her threatened to drown her completely. A raw, guttural howl ripped from her throat, echoing through the ancient trees of the Blackwood, not a lament, but a defiant roar of frustration. "Mastery," she croaked, her voice rusty from disuse. "I will achieve it." The ruined shrine became her sanctuary, her arena. She began with simple drills, running, leaping, scaling the weathered stones. Each action was a calculated suppression of her wild instincts. She visualized invisible restraints, boundaries she dared not transgress. She trained by vaulting fallen trees, landing with the grace of a shadow, claws retracted. The forest floor became her dojo, each step measured, precise. Days blurred into weeks, and weeks morphed into months. Seasons cycled through the Blackwood, painting it with vibrant greens, then blazing oranges, and finally the austere purity of winter's snow. Ilara adapted. She learned to interpret the whispers of the wind, to decipher animal tracks etched in the pristine snow, to seek refuge in the gnarled embrace of ancient boughs. Hunting became a focused endeavor, taking only what sustenance she required, offering silent gratitude to the guardian spirits of the woods. She mastered the art of skinning and preparing her kills, utilizing every part of the animal with reverence. She fashioned garments from cured hides, wove baskets from pliant reeds, and shaped stones into rudimentary tools. The blackwood, initially a symbol of her banishment, transformed into her mentor, her provider, her haven. Close-quarters combat, however, presented a different challenge entirely. Her early attempts were ungainly, fueled by pure force and reflex. She sparred with phantoms, striking at unseen adversaries, leaving behind a trail of shattered wood and scarred earth. It was a maelstrom of unrestrained power. Then, one afternoon, she encountered a solitary wolf, its coat as dark as a moonless night, its eyes gleaming like glacial ice. It observed her from a distance, head tilted, as if weighing her value. Ilara stilled, her breath catching in her chest. She felt no aggression emanating from it, only curiosity. She lowered herself to the ground, mirroring the wolf's relaxed posture. She closed her eyes, concentrating on regulating her breathing, slowing her racing heart. She extended her senses, not with predatory intent, but with a hesitant offering of amity. The wolf edged closer, then again. It circled her cautiously, sniffing the air currents. Finally, it nudged her hand with its snout, a clear signal of acceptance. Ilara devoted weeks to watching the wolf, absorbing its movements, its hunting strategies, its pack dynamics despite its solitary existence. She witnessed the efficiency of its attacks, the elegance of its movements, the unwavering intensity of its gaze. She understood that genuine power wasn't merely brute strength, it was finesse, strategy, and unbreakable control. She began to incorporate the wolf's techniques into her own regimen. She practiced stalking, emulating its silent stride, its seamless transitions from stillness to explosive action. She learned to harness her weight and momentum, to anticipate her opponent's strategies, to strike with unerring accuracy. The blackwood posed trials at every turn. A furious badger guarding its burrow, a possessive hawk diving from above, a sudden deluge that threatened to drag her under. Each encounter tested her mettle, compelling her to adjust, to invent, to evolve. She unlocked new dimensions of her lunar magic. She could absorb strength from the moonlight, channeling its essence into her muscles, augmenting her speed and responsiveness. She could manipulate the shadows, conjuring mirages, masking her presence. She could even mend superficial injuries, drawing upon the moon's healing luminescence. Years drifted by. The fearful, heartbroken mate Ilara once was had faded into a distant memory, a specter in the margins of her consciousness. A warrior had risen in her stead, hardened by adversity, tempered in the crucible of betrayal. Her physique was toned and resilient, her muscles sculpted with force. Her gaze, once clouded by uncertainty and apprehension, now blazed with unwavering determination. The wildness within her was no longer a liability, but a weapon, an instrument, an integral element of her being. She had melded with the blackwood, a creature of shadow and moonlight, a force to be reckoned with. One night, bathed in the frigid glow of the full moon, she stood at the threshold of the blackwood, peering out at the faint glimmer of her former pack's domain. A sliver of a smile played on her lips. The moment had arrived. She inhaled deeply, filling her lungs with the scent of pine and loam. She closed her eyes, focusing on the burning coal of vengeance simmering within her core. "They will atone," she murmured, her voice a low rumble, that vibrated with lunar power. They will all atone. The aroma of resin and turned earth clung to the blackwood, a balm Ilara usually welcomed. Today, however, anxiety buzzed beneath her fur, sharpening every rustle and snap. For weeks she'd shadowed Silas, a relic whispered about among the forest's denizens, a wolf untouched by pack law, steeped in forgotten wisdom. He represented her last resort, the only one capable of comprehending the tumultuous magic swirling within, a lunar force that both amplified her and threatened to shatter her. His lair, concealed within a deep cut in the land, lay veiled by a cascade of ivy beneath the skeletal limbs of primeval trees. Around it, the air pulsed with a tangible energy, igniting a primal response within her. She advanced with deliberate care, mindful that this required not brute strength, but reverence. Worthiness must be proven. Halting before the curtain of verdant tendrils, Ilara lowered her head in supplication. "Silas," she rumbled, her voice a low declaration, "I seek guidance." Silence stretched, filled only by the sighs of the wind in the canopy. Just as doubt began to gnaw at her resolve, twin embers ignited within the den's maw. Ancient orbs, they seemed to plumb the very depths of her soul. Then Silas emerged, a mosaic of silver and charcoal, his movements measured and deliberate. Colossal, even among wolves, he radiated an aura of immeasurable power and composed command. He scrutinized her, his gaze unwavering. "You bear the mark of the eclipse," he finally declared, his voice a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to rise from the soil itself. "A perilous gift, and a weighty cross." Ilara raised her head, meeting his eyes. "I struggle to master it. It threatens to drown me." Silas offered a slow nod. "Power divorced from understanding becomes a consuming fire. It devours all in its path, including the wielder." With a flick of his tail, he turned and vanished back into the den's gloom, inviting her to follow. The interior proved surprisingly spacious, the atmosphere thick with earthen scents and herbal tangs. Sunlight pierced hairline fractures in the rock, illuminating swirling galaxies of dust. Silas settled onto a bed of moss and pine, those golden eyes fixed on Ilara. "Tell me," he began, "what understanding do you possess of the power within?" Ilara hesitated, searching for precision in her words. I know its connection to the moon, that it sharpens my strength, heightens my senses. Yet it's more than mere enhancement. It feels ancient, untamed, and wild, Silas conceded with a nod. Lunar magic is the life source of this world, the connective force. It fuels our strength, our instincts, our very essence, but it is a capricious force. Mastering it demands understanding. For hours he shared sagas of elder wolves, the Blackwood's original guardians, who learned to guide the lunar current without drowning in its shadows. He spoke of balance instinct tempered by reason, might laced with compassion. The eclipse, he revealed, had not merely bestowed power, but unlocked a latent lineage within her, a bond to ancient ways lost to modern packs. "Your change," Silas elucidated, "transcended the physical. It was a reawakening. The eclipse burned away weakness, hesitation, shackles. It revealed the authentic nature of your spirit." Ilara listened intently, absorbing each word. She'd always felt adrift, an outsider in her own pack. Now, the reason crystallized. She was not meant to be confined by their rules, their rote behaviors. Destiny awaited. "But mastery eludes me," she confessed, desperation coloring her tone. How do I prevent it from consuming me? Silas rose, his gaze intense. You must embrace the untamed spirit residing within. Accept the wildness residing in your heart. Lunar magic is not an enemy, but a force deserving of veneration. It is inseparable from you, as vital as blood and cal. Breath. He led her from the den to a moonlit clearing, secluded and serene. Tonight, he announced, training commences. You shall learn to conduct the lunar current, to focus its energy, to shape it to your will. Under Silas's vigilant tutelage, Ilara trained for weeks. He pushed her, challenging both her stamina and mental fortitude. He taught her to meditate under the full moon's gaze, to commune with the earth's pulse, to heed the wind's whispers. He revealed how to infuse her strikes with lunar energy, augmenting her pace, resilience, and suppleness. Crucially, he mentored her in self-understanding. He guided her in confronting anxieties, misgivings, and resentment. He demonstrated that authentic strength stemmed not from physical dominance, but from inner serenity, from self-acceptance. Vengeance, he explained, was a natural response to suffering, but a corrosive one. Revenge offers fleeting solace, Ilara, Silas cautioned one night by a crackling fire. Ultimately, it leaves you hollow. True remedy lies in absolution, in releasing the past and seizing the future. Ilara knew his words held truth, yet the notion of absolving her former pack, of relinquishing the pain they inflicted, felt almost beyond her. The treachery still festered, a raw, stubborn wound. I don't know that I can, she confessed, her voice barely audible. Silas placed a reassuring paw on her shoulder. I am not demanding you erase their transgression. I am merely suggesting you chart your own course. Decide what manner of wolf you aspire to become. Will anger and hatred define you? Or will you transcend, creating a brighter future for yourself, for others? His words resonated deeply, sowing the seeds of change. Perhaps vengeance was not the only path. Perhaps a better way existed. Perhaps she could wield her newfound power to forge a world spared the pain she had known. As weeks bled into months, Ilara's control over her lunar magic solidified. She learned to wield it with precision and finesse, becoming a formidable force. More significantly, she found healing. She forgave herself for past missteps, accepted her history, and embraced what lay ahead. One day, during a training session, Silas halted her. He studied her, his golden eyes brimming with pride. You are prepared, he declared. You have mastered lunar magic and found inner peace. The weak, broken creature who sought guidance is gone. You stand now a warrior, a leader, a beacon. Ilara gazed at Silas, her heart overflowing with gratitude. He had not only equipped her to manage her powers, but had illuminated the path to self-discovery, healing, and forgiveness. He had gifted her a fresh start. Thank you, Silas, she spoke, her voice thick with emotion. I can never repay you. Silas smiled, a rare, beautiful expression. You owe me nothing, Ilara. All you have achieved, you have earned. Now, go, fulfill your destiny. Ilara nodded, resolute. Her journey, she knew, was far from complete. A confrontation with her former pack, with the alpha who betrayed her, remained inevitable. But fear no longer held sway. She stood ready, stronger than ever. She turned and melted into the Blackwood's depths, leaving Silas alone in the clearing. He watched her depart, hope warming his heart. He knew Ilara was destined for greatness, that she would use her strength to usher in peace and justice. and he knew his role, however small, in her metamorphosis, would remain a cherished memory. He closed his eyes, listening to the wind as it whispered through the trees, carrying Ilara's scent into the night. He had fulfilled his purpose. Now, the rest was up to her. Whispers of a dying pack, the blackwood exhaled secrets on the wind, a somber susurrus through the venerable canopy. At the glade's threshold, Ilara inhaled the resinous tang of evergreens mingled with the loam's deep musk, a solace now tinged with disquiet. Silas emerged, his gait measured, his coat frosted with a heavier silver than she recalled. Yet his gaze, ancient pools of knowing, still burned with unwavering wisdom. "They're faltering," he rumbled, his voice a ground tremor that resonated deep within her. Ilara's brow furrowed, her fingers seeking the cool reassurance of the silver bracelet, a physical echo of a past she'd severed ties with. "The pack?" she queried, the answer already a leaden weight in her heart. Silas confirmed with a nod. "A blight festers, sapping strength and befogging minds." And, his gaze locked onto hers. Rivals circle, drawn by the scent of vulnerability. Dread coiled in Ilara's gut. She'd spent moons grappling with resentment, forging fortitude from anguish. But the thought of her forsaken kin's suffering rekindled a spark she believed extinguished. Empathy. "What manner of sickness?" "The healers are baffled," Silas replied, a shake of his head. "Some whisper of dark conjuring, a curse born of ancient spite. Others claim it's merely nature's pruning, excising the infirm," Ilara scoffed. "Nature is rarely so dramatic." She recalled the pack's arrogance, their unshakable belief in inherent superiority. Could their prideful nature have finally borne bitter fruit? "Regardless of its origin," Silas pressed, "they are exposed. Death claims many, even the cubs. The alpha he struggles to hold the fraying threads of control. The alpha. Jackson." His name tasted like ashes in her mouth, a sharp reminder of the betrayal that had cleaved her life in two. He had banished her, deemed her unworthy, humiliated her before all. Revenge had long been her lodestar, the vow of retribution the fuel that warmed her through bleakest nights. But now, "Why confide in me this news, Silas?" she asked, her tone sharper than intended. Silas met her gaze, his expression an unreadable tapestry. "Because you are no longer the weakling they ostracized, Ilara. Power courses through you, power they cannot comprehend. A choice awaits you. Choices, always choices." She could remain here, in the sanctuary she had painstakingly built, sheltered from the pain and deceits. She could observe from a safe distance as the pack imploded, as Jackson's reign crumbled into dust. It would be justice, of a bleak sort. "But they merit their impending doom," she declared, the words dripping with the venom she had cultivated. "They forged their own fate. Let them now face the consequences." Silas remained mute, his gaze unwavering. He needed no further speech. His very presence a gentle nudge, a reminder of the path she had embraced. A path of restoration and comprehension. Ilara pivoted, pacing the perimeter of the clearing. Lunar energies pulsed beneath her skin, restless currents mirroring the conflict raging within her breast. She conjured the faces of packmates, not solely Jackson's cruel sneer, but the innocent eyes of those she had nurtured, the wise countenances of elders she had revered, the stalwart forms of warriors she had stood shoulder to shoulder with. Did they all deserve such an end? "What course would you have me steer, Silas?" she asked, her tone softened, the fury beginning to ebb. "I would have you heed your heart," he answered simply. Remember the wolf you once were, the wolf you are now, and the wolf you are destined to become. Her eyes closed, she sought to quiet the discordant clamor in her mind. The siren call of vengeance remained a potent tide, threatening to drag her into the abyss. Yet another voice, fainter but resolute, whispered of compassion, of responsibility, of perhaps salvation. They cast me out, she breathed, the words a stark admission of abiding pain. They treated me as if I were inconsequential. And now? Silas asked, his voice near inaudible. What has Ilara become? Her eyes flew open, and for the first time in what felt like an age, she saw her genuine reflection mirrored in Silas's profound gaze. She saw not a casualty, not a scorned pariah, but a commanding warrior, a leader, a guardian. She saw a creature forged in the crucible of treachery, and one that had emerged unbroken, infinitely more knowing, infinitely more gracious. I am so much more than their presumptions, she declared, her voice ringing with newfound certainty. And that mandates that I cannot stand idly by. Silas inclined his head, a subtle smile gracing his lips. Then your course is clear. The decision had crystallized, the internal struggle concluded. The allure of retribution had not entirely dissipated, but it had been eclipsed by something purer. A sense of profound duty. Her actions would not be for Jackson, nor for the approval of the pack. She would act for the sake of the blameless, for the promise of a brighter future, for the sake of the wolf she had fought so hard to become. I shall return, she affirmed, her tone resolute, but not as the shadow of my former self. The journey will be fraught with peril, Silas cautioned. They will not greet your return with open arms. Jackson will most certainly perceive you as a menace. Let him, Ilara responded, defiance flickering in her eyes. He no longer holds dominion over my fears. No one does. Allies will be vital, Silas said, his gaze sweeping towards the blackwood. Within the pack, there linger wolves who recall your benevolence, who question Jackson's stewardship. Seek them. Trust your instincts. And what of you, Silas? Ilara inquired. Will you accompany me? Silas shook his head. My days of physical conflict have faded into memory. My role now is to counsel, to guide. Knowledge is my weapon, not claws. But I shall remain here, watchful, patient, and should the need arise, you will know where to find me. Ilara offered a nod, warmth washing over her. Silas had been her bulwark, her mentor, her confidant. She would forever remain in his debt. I depart at dawn, she announced, turning her gaze to the horizon, where the first vestiges of light were piercing the darkness. Then seek rest, Silas advised. Prepare yourself. The path ahead will be arduous and long. Ilara nodded, yet remained rooted to the spot. She lingered at the edge of the clearing, the wind lashing her fur, carrying the lament of a pack on the precipice. A pack she was poised to rejoin, not as a victim, but as a champion. A pack she would indelibly transform. The gravity of that responsibility settled upon her shoulders, a burden weighty yet not insurmountable. She was ready. She was stronger than she had ever been, and she would not be defeated. The moon, a mere crescent in the pre-dawn sky, pulsed with silent approval, bathing her in its ethereal glow. This was her purpose, and she would claim it. Return of the shadow, the reek of rot permeated the air, a sickly sweetness coating Ilara's tongue like bitter honey. This wasn't the vibrant, thriving territory she remembered, the sanctuary she'd been exiled from, but a pack teetering on the precipice. From her concealed perch amid ancient pines, darkness her ally, she observed the clearing below. The one's lively hub was now a portrait of abject despair. Gaunt wolves moved with a listless gait, their weariness a testament to sickness and fading hope. Their coats, once gleaming, were now dull and matted. Their howls, formerly proud declarations, were reduced to fractured echoes against the forest's encroaching silence. Ilara's heightened senses, amplified by the lunar magic singing in her veins, delivered a stark catalogue of their suffering. She felt the heavy cloak of their despondency, a suffocating weight. The very air seemed to thrum with their collective agony. A novel sensation, akin to pity, gnawed at her. She steeled herself, pushing it down. Compassion was a luxury she couldn't yet afford. She needed to fully comprehend the devastation before charting a course. Near the wood's edge, a cluster of pups huddled, their youthful exuberance replaced by vacant apathy. A small, fragile she-wolf with oversized eyes snagged Ilara's attention. She recognized the mother, Lyra, the pack's healer, whose quiet kindnesses had been rare glimmers of humanity amidst the scorn. Lyra offered her daughter a scrap of what appeared to be carrion. The pup refused, whimpering and turning away. The slump of Lyra's shoulders resonated within Ilara more deeply than she anticipated. The pack's fractured energy was palpable, a far cry from the rigid hierarchy she remembered. Now, a veneer of forced obedience barely masked the chaos. A flicker of movement drew Ilara's gaze. Torin. He seemed diminished. The arrogance that had defined him, the self-assuredness that had initially drawn her in, had been supplanted by haunted exhaustion. His shoulders sagged, his eyes shadowed by a guilt that bore down on him. His orders, barked in a strained voice, lacked their former authority. Wolves glanced at him with a mix of fear and simmering resentment. He was striving to maintain order, to bind the pack together, but the effort etched lines of strain on his face. He paused by the crumbling stone structure, the remnants of the training grounds. Staring blankly at the ruined stones, his expression was a cipher. He raked a hand through his unkempt fur, a gesture of frustration that spoke volumes. Ilara recalled their shared training, the easy camaraderie, the intertwined dreams of a future now seemingly unattainable. The memory kindled a spark of anger, a resentment hotter than the brief flicker of pity. He had turned against her, joining the chorus of condemnation when Jackson banished her. He had chosen power and acceptance over loyalty, over her. Ilara watched as a smaller wolf tentatively approached Torin, his voice low and beseeching. Torin listened, his face hardening. He shook his head, his tone sharp and dismissive. The smaller wolf recoiled, his defeat evident in his drooping posture and tucked tail. This interaction solidified Ilara's assessment. Torin was floundering, crushed by a burden he was manifestly unprepared to bear. He was buckling under the pressure, reverting to the same brutal methods that had characterized Jackson's reign. He was becoming the very monster he had once claimed to despise. Something stirred within Ilara, not quite satisfaction, but a grim recognition of the cruel irony. He was tasting the bitter fruit of his choices. He had grasped for power, and now it was consuming him. Clenching the branch beneath her, the rough bark biting into her skin, she acknowledged her initial intention: retribution, to make them answer for their betrayal. But witnessing their plight, the pack reduced to this state of desperation, had complicated her resolve. She saw Lyra approach Torin, worry etched on her face. Her voice was soft yet firm as she spoke. Torin listened, his features softening slightly. He nodded, then turned and walked away, leaving Lyra standing alone, her expression a blend of hope and despair. Ilara focused on Lyra, searching for a flicker of recognition. But Lyra's gaze passed over her hidden form, oblivious to the phantom lurking in the shadows. Ilara was a ghost, a relic of their past, unrecognizable in her transformed state. A low growl vibrated in Ilara's chest, a sound both feral and infused with raw, untamed force. She had come to witness their ruin, to revel in their desolation. But she found not a pack deserving of destruction, but one desperately craving salvation. Broken, weakened, vulnerable. The dilemma before her had transcended revenge, becoming something far more intricate. Could she, should she, wield her newfound power to rescue the very wolves who had betrayed her? Could she forgive the sins of the past, the pain they had inflicted? The answer, she realized, wasn't as clear-cut as she had presumed. It wasn't about them. Not anymore. It was about her. It was about proving to herself that she was stronger than their hatred, capable of rising above their squabbles and embracing a destiny far grander than vengeance. A sliver of moon, a pale blade in the darkening heavens, pierced the canopy, casting an ethereal luminescence upon the clearing. Ilara closed her eyes, drawing strength from the lunar energy coursing through her. She inhaled deeply, the odor of decay filling her lungs. But this time, it didn't suffocate, it fueled her. It was a stark reminder of the stakes, the lives hanging in the balance. When she opened her eyes, her gaze was unwavering. Doubt had receded, replaced by steely resolve. She would return. She would aid them, but on her terms. She would demonstrate the true meaning of strength, the essence of loyalty, and she would ensure they understood the magnitude of their error. The Shadow's return was imminent. A stranger's intervention, a bestial scream tore through the stillness, and the metallic tang of fear stung Ilara's senses, even veiled as she was among the ancient, twisted trees. Below, their shattered territory had become a theater of brutality. Reese, a feral grin twisting his features, spearheaded the onslaught. The rival pack, preying on their vulnerability, descended with predatory hunger. Torin, haggard and depleted, fought with the tenacity of a cornered wolf, but his movements lacked their usual snap, his stamina clearly waning. Beside him, Kale, his second, his face a granite mask of resolve, deflected a savage strike aimed at cleaving Torin in two. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and yielding ground inch by bloody inch. Ilara observed the carnage, her heart a frozen weight. "Avenge yourself," a silent voice urged. "Let them crumble. Let them taste the ruin you endured." She could almost savor the sharp sweetness of their downfall, the justification of her suffering. Then she spotted Lyra, a small, quivering figure, sheltering behind a fallen giant, her eyes reflecting pure, unadulterated terror. A flicker of something akin to compassion, a lingering echo of the loyalty she'd once felt, stirred within her frozen core. No, not for them. This would be her declaration, a testament that she was not frail, not inconsequential, not the pariah they had forced her to believe she was. She would unveil the strength they had ridiculed, the potential they had ignored. With a silent growl, Ilara cast aside her shadowy guise and stepped into the clearing. The air shimmered with unseen power as lunar energy coursed through her, reshaping her very being. Bones cracked and reset, muscles swelled, and her senses sharpened to an almost unbearable degree. She was become a vessel of moonfire and rage, a primal force unleashed upon the night. Rhys, momentarily caught off guard by Torrhen's failing defense, noticed her first. His eyes widened in disbelief, a fleeting shadow of doubt eclipsing his brutal confidence. "What in damnation?" Ilara offered no reply, instead moving with impossible swiftness, a silvered phantom against the backdrop of the shadowed woods. The first attacker never saw what hit him. One moment he was lunging for Kale, the next he was airborne, propelled by a blow that splintered ribs and choked off his breath. He crashed to earth with a dull thud, unconscious before he landed. A collective intake of breath swept through both packs. The fighting stuttered, the combatants momentarily stunned. Ilara stood, a vision of terrifying grace, bathed in the ethereal glow of the moon. Her eyes burned with an inner luminescence, and her very presence throbbed with raw power. "Who are you?" Rhys challenged, a thread of caution now woven into his tone. He circled her, a predator wary of a new, unknown threat, his pack instinctively closing ranks around him. Ilara turned her gaze upon him, a slow, deliberate motion that sent an involuntary shiver down his spine. "Someone you should have feared from the beginning." She exploded into motion before he could react, a whirlwind of fang and claw. Rhys, despite his superior bulk and inherent ferocity, found himself utterly overwhelmed. Her attacks were relentless, precise, and devastatingly swift. He barely deflected a strike that would have eviscerated him, the force of the parry sending him stumbling backward. Another swipe tore across his shoulder, eliciting a roar of pain. The remainder of Rhys's pack surged forward, hoping to drown her in their sheer numbers. But Ilara was prepared. She unleashed a surge of pure lunar energy, a concussive blast that sent bodies hurtling. Wolves yelped as they slammed into trees, their forms bruised and broken. Torrhen and Kale watched, speechless. Never had they witnessed such a spectacle. This was not the Ilara they remembered, the quiet, overlooked member of their community. This was a warrior, a storm incarnate, a being of unimaginable power. Doubt gnawed at Torrhen's already beleaguered mind. How could he have been so blind? Ilara pressed her advantage, systematically dismantling Rhys's forces. She refrained from killing, instead leaving them bruised, bleeding, and their confidence in tatters. Rhys, humiliated and aching, conceded defeat. With a frustrated snarl, he signaled a retreat. "This is far from concluded," he threatened, his gaze burning with venom. "We will return." Ilara watched them withdraw, her expression inscrutable. She allowed their escape for now. They had received their lesson, a stark reminder that perceived weakness invites aggression. As the last of Rhys's warriors vanished into the gloom, Ilara shifted her attention to her former pack. They stared at her, their eyes reflecting a disquieting mix of awe, terror, and bewilderment. Torrhen, ashen-faced, stepped hesitantly forward. "Ilara?" he ventured, his voice barely audible. "Is that really you?" She regarded him coldly, her face impassive. "That designation carries no relevance." Kale, ever pragmatic, interjected. What exactly are you?" "Something you fostered," Ilara responded, her voice like honed steel. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have concluded my task here." With those words, she turned and melted back into the shadows, leaving the pack to grapple with the profound implications of what they had just experienced. The forest lapsed into silence, broken only by the whimpers of the injured and the shallow breathing of the survivors. Torrhen stood, shoulders slumped beneath the weight of his misjudgments, his gaze locked on the spot where Ilara had stood moments before. He had ostracized her, dismissed her perceived frailty, and now she had returned not driven by vengeance, but to expose the magnitude of their own shortcomings. The victory tasted like ashes, poisoned by the realization of their loss, and the terrifying might that now lurked within the shadows. His position as Alpha felt precarious, threatened not only by external enemies, but by the specter of the woman he had failed to shield. The Alpha's recognition the battle's residue clung to the air, a cloying mix of resinous pine and metallic blood. Torin, Alpha of the Crescent Moon Pack, surveyed the wounded, weariness carving lines into his face. He'd been a witness to a raw, untamed force unlike any he'd encountered. He had even felt its bite, a palpable energy that had scythed through the forest, crushing the rival pack's assault with brutal efficiency. His gaze sought out the figure limned by the moon's glow at the edge of the trees. That power pulsed from her. He approached, trepidation prickling his wolf senses with warnings he found difficult to name. A familiarity teased him, a certain bearing, yet everything else felt profoundly alien. Enshrouded in lunar light, her features were indistinct, yet the sheer intensity of her stare bored into him. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice roughened. "What is your purpose?" The figure remained still for what felt like an eternity, the susurrus of leaves the only reply. Then, a voice, glacial and precise, cut through the silence. "I am the consequence of your actions, Torin." The word struck with the force of a physical wound. Recognition flickered. It was familiar. Impossible. He closed the distance, his eyes straining to pierce the gloom obscuring her face. "That's not possible," he rasped, barely audible. Ilara was vulnerable. A hollow laugh reverberated through the clearing. "Vulnerability is a construct, Alpha," she retorted, her voice laced with contempt. "You saw only what you chose to see." The formality stung, a deliberate jab. He scrutinized her features, desperate for something, anything, to negate the truth. "Ilara?" He choked, the name a bitter taste. The figure finally moved into the moonlight, revealing a visage both known and irrevocably altered. The once tender features he recalled now possessed a sharp, chiseled beauty, almost inhuman. Her eyes, once alight with warmth, now burned with arctic fire. "Indeed, Torin," she breathed, her voice venomous. "It is I, the despised mate you abandoned, the stain on your pack." He recoiled, his hand instinctively flying to his mouth. A wave of nausea threatened to overwhelm him, the weight of her transformation a crushing burden. This couldn't be the same Ilara he'd dismissed, mocked, rejected. This Ilara commanded a power that rendered his own insignificant. "How?" he managed, his thoughts reeling. "What has become of you?" "I discovered resilience," she answered, her gaze unwavering. "A strength you could never fathom. One forged in agony, in betrayal, from the embers of my former life." He saw the truth reflected in the set of her jaw, the glacial composure of her eyes. He had birthed this force of nature with his own callousness and pride. Sarah, who had observed from the periphery, surged forward, her eyes narrowed with animosity. "What is this charade, Torin?" she snapped. "Who is this she-wolf?" She glared at Ilara, undisguised hostility in her eyes. "She claims acquaintance? Some vagrant you salvaged?" Ilara redirected her attention to Sarah, amusement flickering in her eyes. "Vagrant?" she echoed, disdain dripping from each syllable. "I belong to no one, little wolf. I am the gathering storm." Sarah bristled at the affront, her hand instinctively gravitating towards the dagger at her waist. "You dare!" address me in such a manner?" she hissed. "You underestimate your opponent." "Hardly," Ilara countered, her eyes narrowing. "You are Sarah, the viperous climber who coveted my position, the purveyor of poison in Torin's ear, seeking favor." A flush of anger stained Sarah's face. "Lies," she spat. "My only concern has ever been the welfare of the pack." "Truly?" Ilara questioned, her voice dangerously soft. "Or did you merely perceive an opening to ascend, regardless of the cost to others?" Torin watched their interplay, his mind racing. He was aware of Sarah's ambition, her merciless hunger for status. He had deliberately ignored her schemes, too consumed by his self-importance to perceive the damage inflicted. Now, he was compelled to acknowledge the ramifications of his negligence. "Enough!" he bellowed, his voice reverberating through the clearing. "This is not the moment for trivial conflicts. We face a dire situation." He faced Ilara once more, his eyes beseeching. "What is your objective, Ilara? Why have you resurfaced?" Ilara's expression softened momentarily, a fleeting glimpse of the woman she once was piercing through the hardened exterior. But the instant vanished quickly, superseded by the cold, unyielding stare he now dreaded. "I have already told you, Torin," she stated, her voice devoid of emotion. "I am the creation of your actions. And I am here to unveil the dire consequences." She pivoted and melted into the shadows, departing as swiftly as she had arrived. Torin watched her fade away, his soul burdened with guilt and contrition. He had failed her, and in doing so, endangered his entire pack. He'd given rise to a monstrous power, and now he had to shoulder the repercussions. The stark realization hit him with brutal force. His dominance was over. His reign as Alpha was being challenged not by a rival pack, but by the woman he'd once disdained, now resurrected as a vengeful force. He had to discover a way to halt her, to atone for his mistakes, before she obliterated all he held sacred. But a terrifying question resonated within him. Was he capable? Sarah watched Ilara melt into the forest's embrace, her jaw a rigid line, a bitter coil tightening in her stomach. The air still thrummed with the echo of Ilara's raw strength, an unwelcome testament to the widening gulf between them. How dare she waltz back in, brandishing abilities she'd never shown before, upsetting the careful balance. Sarah had fought tooth and nail for her position, scheming, cajoling, making herself indispensable to Torin. And now, this phantom from their past threatened to topple her carefully constructed world. Eamon, ever the toady, slithered up to her side, his gaze bright with malicious delight. "Did you see the Alpha's face? He looked like he'd swallowed a mouthful of thorns." Finally, someone showed him up. A sharp glare from Sarah silenced him. "Don't be simple, Eamon. This reshapes the board if we're shrewd. Ilara is a danger, and dangers are dealt with." Her gaze swept over the pack, their faces an anxious tapestry of awe and unease. This was her chance. Later, under the watchful eyes of the evening fire, Sarah launched her subtle assault. She started with the younger members, those unfamiliar with Ilara's supposed earlier inadequacies. "Did you catch the way she looked at Torin?" she murmured to Lyra, her voice laced with simulated worry. It wasn't thankfulness, it was defiance. And that power, where did she unearth it? Such potency doesn't just appear. What bargain did she strike? Lyra's eyes grew wide, her youthful idealism beginning to crack. "But she rescued us," she offered weakly. "She shielded us from the rogues." Sarah scoffed, a picture of contrived reason. "Rescued us? Or displayed how easily broken we are?" She could have shared that gift, instructed us. Instead, she wields it as a cudgel, a perpetual reminder of our fragility. And who's to say we won't be her target? Next, the seed of doubt was sown. Sarah continued, choosing her audiences with care, adapting her persuasions to their private anxieties. To one, she alluded to Ilara's unraveling control, hinting her strength had shattered her sanity. To another, she breathed of Ilara's aspirations, implying she might challenge Torin for dominance. The falsehoods were subtle, insidious, built to take root and flourish. Torin sat alone in his den, the scents of pine needles and moist earth offering scant comfort. He replayed his exchange with Ilara, each syllable a stinging rebuke. The consequence of your actions. Her accusation echoed in the stillness, a damning verdict on his history. He knew his cruelty had been fueled by ego and the pack's expectations. Strength had triumphed over affection, tradition over empathy. Now, he tasted the acrid fruit of his choices. The burden of his guilt threatened to crush him. He yearned for Nia's wisdom, to seek her guidance, but shame held him captive. How could he reveal his failings to the one soul who had always trusted him, who had warned him of his heartlessness? Sarah slipped into the den unannounced, her presence a grating disturbance. Torin, she stated, her tone soft with false concern. Are you well? You seem troubled. He avoided her gaze, aware her anxiety was a charade. Sarah had always craved power, ever ready to exploit any advantage. He'd once used that drive to his benefit, but now, he suspected, she sensed his vulnerability and sought to capitalize. I'm fine, he managed, his voice raspy, just a contemplating. Sarah drew nearer, her eyes probing his features. Ilara's return had unsettled the pack. They're rattled by her might, uncertain of her designs. Some are even second-guessing your command. Torin finally met her stare, his own hardening. And you, I presume, have all the explanations, Sarah. She laid a hand on his arm, her touch sending a tremor of discomfort through him. I desire only the pack's well-being, Torin, and what's paramount right now is stability. We must reassure them of your authority, that Ilara won't be allowed to disrupt our order. She paused, allowing her words to penetrate. Some even whisper she might usurp your alpha status. After all, she surpasses you in strength now. And she certainly has a vendetta to pursue. Torin winced. He loathed that she voiced the apprehension he fought to suppress. Ilara wouldn't do that, he asserted, but his voice lacked force. Sarah arched a brow, her expression dubious. Wouldn't she? You rejected her, Torin. Humiliated her publicly. Do you truly believe she'll simply forgive and forget? Particularly now that she has the means to retaliate. She leaned closer, her voice a velvety, seductive murmur. You must demonstrate to the pack that you remain the alpha, Torin. You must remind Ilara that she holds no sway. Nia wandered through the woods, the aroma of dewy earth and blossoming flora filling her senses. But tonight, the woods felt tainted, marred by a current of dread and suspicion that had seeped into the pack's heart. She could discern the friction, the delicate shifts in energy, the whispers borne on the breeze. Sarah, she knew, was responsible, tainting the pack with her fabrications and manipulations. Nia had always been cautious of Sarah's hunger for control, her ruthless assent, but she had hoped, perhaps unwisely, that Sarah would prioritize the pack's welfare above her personal ambitions. Now, she understood, she had erred. Sarah was prepared to forfeit anything, even pack unity, to solidify her position. Nia halted by ancient oak, its roots a twisting maze, a representation of strength and endurance. She closed her eyes, drawing on the earth's essence, soliciting guidance. She knew she had to intervene, to counteract Sarah's venomous influence. But how? A direct clash would only fan the flames of contention. She needed to discover a means to heal the pack, to rekindle their shared past, their common connection. She needed to find a route to reach Torin, to assist him in seeing past Sarah's deceptions. But Torin, she feared, was too steeped in his own remorse and anxieties to perceive the peril surrounding him. Aemon discovered Sarah near the territory's boundary, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. "They're gossiping, just as you intended." He nodded back towards the camp. "The younger ones, especially. They're starting to view Ilara with terror, not gratitude. Some even suggest she should leave." Sarah smiled, a predatory gleam lighting her eyes. "Excellent. Let them gossip. Let the terror breed. Fear is a potent weapon, Aemon, and at this moment, it's our greatest advantage. Share stories. Aemon. Reiterate the ancient principles. Tell them Ilara's power is unnatural, an abomination of the balance. Tell them she threatens everything we value." Aemon bowed, his allegiance absolute. "As you command." "Sarah." He hesitated, a furrow creasing his brow. "But what of Torin?" He appears detached, hesitant. Sarah's smile vanished, replaced by a look of icy calculation. "Torin presents a challenge, but a manageable one. He's feeble, consumed by regret. We'll exploit his weakness. We'll remind him of his office, of his obligation to safeguard the pack, and we'll guarantee he understands that Ilara poses a threat to that duty." She gazed out into the press. Darkness, her eyes blazing with aspiration. Ilara may have come back with power, but power isn't the only key. Loyalty, fear, manipulation, these are the genuine weapons, and I intend to wield them all. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying her decree into the night, sowing the seeds of uncertainty and schism among the crescent moon pack. "Healing and division, my aid is available," Ilara declared, her voice puncturing the rising clamor that followed her display. All eyes drilled into her. A potent brew of wonder, trepidation, and skepticism swirling within their depths. Torin, still staggered by the unveiling of her powers, stayed mute, his stare fixed on her visage, seeking something indefinable. Sarah, however, reacted with alacrity. Her tone, barbed and dripping with acid, shattered the precarious quiet. "Help? After all this absence, you resurface, brandishing some unnatural talent, and expect our faith?" Ilara returned Sarah's flinty gaze without flinching. "My departure was not of my choosing, but this pack never left my thoughts. I comprehend the nature of this affliction. The wasting disease, it's an insidious poison, debilitating their lupine forms. I possess the means to neutralize it." A wave of murmurs swept through the assembled wolves. Seeds of uncertainty took root, nourished by Sarah's pointed words and their own primal fear of the unknown. Ilara felt their distrust like a tangible force, a wall she needed to dismantle. Nia advanced, her features furrowed with concern. "What's your proposition?" she inquired, her tone even and considered. "I must channel my essence through each wolf, one by one. This will expunge the toxin, reinforce their bond to their animal selves, but it will render them susceptible for a short duration," Ilara elucidated, her gaze encompassing the pack. "The task will be draining, but it's the only remedy I know." "Susceptible?" Sarah seized upon the word like prey, her voice curdled with contempt. "So, you propose to weaken us all, Expose us to assault? This stinks of a trap. That's a falsehood, Ilara countered, frustration tightening her voice. I strive to preserve your lives. The pack remained fractured, their anxieties outweighing any nascent hope. Finally, Torin shifted, his face etched with inner conflict. What assurances can you offer? He queried, his voice a deep thrum. Ilara turned to him, her eyes probing his. None, save my word. You must rely on me. The utterance lingered, heavy with the burden of their intertwined past. Bram, who had observed the exchange with growing disquiet, stepped forward, resting a hand on Ilara's forearm. Enough, he stated, his voice surprisingly resolute. Her help is proffered. What viable choice remains? Shall we stand idly by and watch our pack wither, consumed by doubt and apprehension? He scrutinized the faces around him, challenging their uncertainty. I place my faith in her. I witnessed her demonstration. It was genuine. His words resonated, a stark contrast to Sarah's toxic insinuations. A low rumble of accord moved through the throng, swiftly quelled by Sarah's vehement retort. You're a simpleton, Bram, she hissed. Blinded by nostalgia. She's manipulating you all. Cease, Sarah, Bram snapped, his eyes blazing with sudden ire. I refuse to allow you to twist her benevolence. She dangles a lifeline, and you attempt to sever it. The air crackled with tension, thick as static. Loyalties frayed. Alliances buckled. The pack was cleft asunder, split between those clinging to the deceptive embrace of Torin and Sarah, and those who dared to entertain the possibility of Ilara's improbable return. Torin observed the unfolding drama, his face a study in inner turmoil. He perceived the wariness in the eyes of his pack, the tendrils of dissent that Sarah had so skillfully cultivated. He knew he stood at a precipice, a decision that would chart the course of his pack's destiny. Yet, he was hobbled by his own remorse, his own creeping dread. Ilara felt the weight of their scrutiny, the conflicting emotions swirling like a tempest around her. She saw flickers of expectation amidst the unease, and the cold calculation blazing in Sarah's gaze. She knew this skirmish was merely the opening volley, that the true fight for the pack's acceptance had barely commenced. I appreciate your reluctance, Ilara said, finding her composure once more. I don't demand blind faith. However, I implore you to consider the alternative. Inertia guarantees the sickness will prevail. You will all suffer a slow demise. She paused, her gaze sweeping over them again. I will begin with Bram, she said, inclining her head toward him. He has volunteered his trust. Let him be proof that my motivations are pure. Bram nodded, stepping forward without hesitation. Ilara steered him away from the throng, toward the fringe of the clearing, where shadows deepened and the trees murmured secrets. She sensed the collective gaze of the pack bore into her back, filled with both foreboding and hope. As they walked, Bram turned to her, his expression etched with concern. Are you certain about this, Ilara? Their doubt is palpable. I'm compelled to act, she said, her voice firm. I cannot remain passive while they succumb, even if they harbor animosity towards me. Bram squeezed her hand, his touch a silent balm. I have faith in you, he said. I know you'll act with integrity. Ilara offered a smile, a fleeting spark of warmth in her eyes. Thank you, Bram. Your words carry immense weight. Reaching the edge of the open space, Ilara turned to face the pack, her eyes gleaming with resolve. I am prepared, she announced, her voice ringing out, clear and unwavering. Who volunteers next? Silence was the only response, a dense, suffocating silence that hung in the night air like a portent. The pack remained polarized, their fate suspended, poised to discover if Ilara's actions would herald deliverance or ruination. The wind keened through the branches, carrying with it whispers of suspicion, fear, and a fragile promise of salvation. The night's trials were far from concluded. Exposing treachery, a palpable expectancy vibrated in the air, a delicate hope spun into the clearing's very essence. Bram knelt before, Ilara, his features ashen yet firm. The debilitating illness had already ravaged his physique, leaving him emaciated and frail. His gaze met hers, a silent accord passing between them. He offered everything, Faith, his very being as proof of her honorable intentions. Ilara gently rested her palms against his temples, her eyes drifting shut as she focused her energies. A gentle, otherworldly luminescence radiated from her fingertips, illuminating Bram's face with a comforting warmth. The pack observed, their expressions a mixture of trepidation and morbid fascination. Torin lingered at the clearing's edge, an inscrutable mask veiling the tempest of conflicting emotions churning within. A voice shattered the strained silence. Are we truly placing our lives in her hands? Sarah's query oozed venom, her gaze scrutinizing Ilara. Have we so quickly forgotten her past? A mere shadow, a runt barely capable of a proper shift. Her words hung heavy, burdened by the weight of Ilara's history. Aemon, Sarah's ever-present echo, amplified her sentiments, muttering just loud enough to be heard, always the weak link, always a drag. Nia stepped forward, a furrow creasing her brow. Sarah, this is hardly the moment. Bram has volunteered. Let's see what Ilara can accomplish. Sarah scoffed, dismissing Nia's plea. Accomplish? Or reveal her true colors? Driven away, consumed by bitterness, and heaven knows what dark arts. Do you honestly believe she's returned out of altruism? Or is this some cruel game, a means to finally avenge herself on those who slighted her? Ilara's eyes flashed open, the ethereal glow around Bram momentarily faltering. She turned deliberately, her gaze locking onto Sarah's. My history is no secret, Sarah. I was indeed vulnerable. I was rejected, but I have returned to mend, not to mar. Sarah's laughter grated like nails on stone. Mend? Or mislead? Recall her desperate attempts to please Torin? Remember the pathetic displays of affection, the frantic bids to prove herself? It was humiliating. The alpha deserves a capable mate, not a muling. Whelp. Torin winced, his jaw clenching. He recalled those days, Ilara's unwavering loyalty, his own cold dismissals. Guilt gnawed at him, a familiar ache in his chest. He longed to speak, to stand up for Ilara, but the words remained trapped. Sarah, enough. Bram's voice, though weakened, held surprising force. He pushed himself upright, his eyes burning with indignation. Ilara is here to aid us. She risks everything to save us, and you contribute only fear and mistrust. He addressed the pack, his gaze sweeping across their faces. Have you forgotten the essence of a pack? To unite, to support, or have you succumbed so completely to fear that you would turn against your own? Silence descended, broken only by ragged breathing. Bram's words struck a painful chord. The pack had become fractured, rent by suspicion and animosity. Ilara advanced, her voice ringing with clarity. Sarah speaks of my past frailty, but she conveniently omits her own ambitions. Share your story, Sarah. Tell them of the whispers you spread, the lies you wove, all to undermine Torin and seize control. Sarah's face drained of color, her eyes widening in alarm. What are you implying? Ilara offered a chillingly knowing smile. You believed your schemes were unseen, You underestimated me, Sarah. Even in my weakness, I saw you for what you are. A manipulative, power-hungry wolf willing to sacrifice anyone to achieve your aspirations. She faced the pack, her voice resonating with conviction. Sarah has been poisoning your minds for years, exploiting your vulnerabilities to gain dominance. She stoked the discontent, sowed doubts about Torin's alpha status, and reveled in the pack's anguish, all in the hope of a hope ascending from the ruins. Aemon, ever faithful, stepped forward to shield Sarah. She's lying. Ilara seeks to divert attention from her own betrayal. Ilara fixed him with a powerful gaze. Is she, Aemon? Or are you merely shielding your mistress? Recount the secret rendezvous, the furtive plans, the promises of authority and prestige if you aided Sarah's rise. Aemon's face twisted in fear, his eyes flickering between Sarah and Ilara. He opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. Torin watched the drama unfold, his mind reeling. Could it be accurate? Had Sarah been plotting against him all this time? He had always confided in her, valued her insight, but now he perceived her in a harsh, calculating light that sent shivers down his spine. He moved forward, his voice trembling with a blend of anger and disbelief. Sarah, is this the truth? Have you been scheming against me? Against our pack? Sarah's meticulously constructed facade shattered, revealing the raw ambition and desperation beneath. Torin, I only desired what was beneficial for the pack. You were wavering, indecisive. I only sought to guide you, to assist you in making sound decisions. By lying, by manipulating, by turning the pack against itself? Torin's voice escalated, his anger erupting at last. You claim to care, yet all you crave is power. He turned to the pack, his voice laced with regret. I was blind, a fool. I allowed Sarah's influence to corrupt my judgment, to taint my leadership. I offer my apologies. I have betrayed you. He looked at Ilara, his eyes filled with guilt and gratitude. And I failed you, Ilara. I spurned you, rejected you, when you were the only one who held this pack truly in your heart. A tense quiet descended, punctuated only by the snap and hiss of the nearby flames. The pack members exchanged glances, their features etched with disarray and uncertainty. Their familiar world had been overturned, their cherished beliefs shattered. Ilara approached Torin, her gaze unwavering. The past cannot be undone, Torin. We can only draw lessons from it. We can rebuild this pack, stronger and more unified than before. But it will demand honesty, trust, and a willingness to confront unpalatable truths. She looked at Sarah, her eyes filled with pity. Your ambition consumed you, Sarah. You pursued power, but you lost yourself in the process. Now, you must bear the weight of your choices. She addressed the pack. The healing must not cease. The sickness will continue to advance if we falter now. She returned to Bram, kneeling once more. The ethereal glow returned, bathing his face in its comforting radiance. This time, however, the air felt transformed. Suspicion had receded, giving way to a fragile optimism. The pack watched, their gaze riveted on Ilara, their hearts filled with anticipation and trepidation. The arduous journey toward redemption had commenced, yet the path forward remained treacherous. Sacrifice and redemption the clearing stilled, silence pressing down like the damp earth beneath the pines after a deluge. Torin addressed the pack, his posture defeated, the cost of his errors etched deep in his weathered features. He met Ilara's gaze, her expression a taut map of resolve as she tended Bram, her hands radiating verdant energy. "I was deluded," he admitted, his voice a raspy thread that somehow reached every corner of the glade. "My pride, my anxieties, they sculpted a false reality." He pivoted towards Sarah, whose customary arrogance had given way to a flicker of near panic. "Sarah, your manipulation ends now. Your twisted words have poisoned this pack, fueled by your hunger for dominance. I strip you of all authority. Your deceit is laid bare." Tension vibrated in the air. Sarah's lips curled into a venomous snarl. "You utter simpleton! She doesn't give a damn about you or your pack. She's using you, all of you. Can't you recognize raw power when you see it? She'll subjugate you." Torin disregarded her outburst, his focus unwavering on Ilara. "I failed you. I failed everyone here. My fear became our prison. For that, I offer my deepest remorse. Forgiveness is undeserved, but earning it will be my life's purpose." A guttural growl tore through the stillness, a predatory challenge slicing the quiet. Rhys and his band emerged from the thicket, their eyes gleaming with savage anticipation. They had bided their time, waiting for weakness, for division. "Enough with the sentimental drivel," Rhys spat, his voice laced with toxic amusement. "It's time we concluded this little drama." He jabbed a taloned digit towards Ilara. "She belongs to me." The rival pack surged forward, a living wave of muscle and fury. Though battered and bruised, the Blackwood pack stood their ground, meeting the assault with desperate courage. Ilara straightened, the emerald light receding from her hands, her eyes blazing with a mixture of fierce determination and profound sadness. "Protect Bram," she commanded Kale, her voice ringing with newfound authority. "He is too frail to withstand this." Kale, his face a study in grim resolve, nodded sharply. He had witnessed Ilara's transformation, the untamed power surging within her. Doubt had vanished, replaced by a gnawing fear for her well-being. The ensuing conflict was a brutal ballet of survival, a chaotic whirlwind of tooth and claw. Ilara moved with impossible speed and deadly grace, a green-tinged tempest carving a path through the enemy ranks. Each strike unleashed a force that sent opponents reeling. But Rhys was relentless, his gaze laser-focused on his prize, a burning obsession fueling his advance. Like an unstoppable juggernaut, he smashed through the skirmish, intent on reaching her. Torin fought with the ferocity of a cornered beast, driven by a desperate need for redemption. He became a shield, intercepting blows meant for others, heedless of his own safety. He watched Rhys breach the defensive line, saw the cruel gleam in his eyes as he lunged for Ilara. Time seemed to slow to a sluggish crawl. He saw the extended claws, slick with venom. He saw Ilara, her eyes widening in surprised vulnerability, caught off guard. Without a second thought, Torin hurled himself in the path of Rhys's attack. The claws ripped into his side, a searing agony that threatened to consume him. He choked, the sound swallowed by the din of battle. He sought Ilara's eyes, finding a mixture of regret and something akin to love. "I'm so sorry," he rasped, his voice a mere breath. Rhys, infuriated by the interception, roared in frustrated rage. He shoved Torin aside, sending him sprawling. Before he could press his advantage, Ilara unleashed a surge of raw energy, a concussive blast that slammed into Rhys, sending him stumbling backward. He crashed to the earth, dazed and disoriented. Seeing their leader falter, the rival pack's resolve crumbled. Their assault sputtered, their numbers dwindling under the Blackwood Pack's reinvigorated defense, spurred by Torin's valiant action. Ilara knelt beside Torin, her hands trembling uncontrollably. The wound was devastating, lifeblood spilling freely. His vitality ebbed away. "Torin, no," she pleaded, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Don't succumb." A weak smile touched his lips, a spark of warmth in his dimming eyes. "I had to. I misjudged you, Ilara. You possessed strength I lacked, not merely power, but heart." He coughed, crimson staining his muzzle. "Protect them." Sarah watched from the periphery, her face a mask of frigid fury. Her intricate schemes lay in ruins, her carefully spun web of deceit unraveled. She saw the dawning recognition in the eyes of the pack, the understanding of her betrayal. She was losing everything. Rhys, staggering to his feet, saw the momentum shift irrevocably against him. His pack teetered on the brink of collapse, their morale shattered. He glared at Ilara, her face a canvas of grief and righteous fury. Defeat was inevitable. With a frustrated snarl, he turned and fled, his remaining warriors scattering in panic disarray. The conflict was concluded. The Blackwood Pack would endure. Ilara cradled Torin's failing body, his life force staining her paws. His breathing was shallow, ragged, and broken. "Don't abandon me, Torin," she whispered, tears tracing paths down her face. "Please, stay." His faltering hand reached up, grazing her cheek. "Don't grieve for me, Ilara," he murmured, his voice fading to almost nothing. "Live, be resilient, be the alpha they require." His eyes shuttered closed, his body slackened in her grasp. Torin was gone. Silence descended upon the clearing, broken only by the suppressed sobs of the pack. They had lost their leader, but they had also witnessed a selfless act of valor, a testament to the potential for transformation. Ilara remained kneeling, cradling Torin's corpse. Her heart ached with a sorrow she had never previously fathomed. The mingling sense of blood and pine hung heavy, a grim testament to the battle that had transpired and the price that had been exacted. Sarah melted into the shadows of the Blackwood unnoticed, her eyes burning with resentment and a thirst for retribution. Cale approached Ilara with hesitant steps. He knelt beside her, grief etched upon his features. He sacrificed everything for you, Ilara. His intention was your protection." Ilara lifted her head, her gaze reflecting a complex blend of sorrow and steely resolve. "His intention was the preservation of the pack," she stated, her voice resolute. "And that I pledge." With infinite gentleness, she laid Torin's body upon the earth. Rising, she turned to face the assembled pack. The descending sun cast elongated shadows across the clearing, painting the scene in hues of ochre and crimson. A fresh chapter had begun, forged in sacrifice and illuminated by the uncertain dawn of redemption. The pack fixed their gaze upon her, their eyes reflecting a mixture of anticipation and apprehension, waiting to discern what their destiny held, waiting to see who she would become. A new dawn, the echo of Torin's sacrifice throbbed within Ilara, a spectral ache resonating deep in her marrow. Rhys, scenting weakness on the wind, pressed his assault, claws extended like razors, his face contorted by avarice. "The pack answers to me now, witch, and you will grace my side." Ilara braced herself. Grief lingered, a shard of ice in her spirit. But underneath, the raw force of the Blackwood surged, an instinctive rebellion against oblivion. No more evasion, no more shadows. Torin's gift was a brutal awakening, a forced acceptance of the power she'd long suppressed. She evaded Rhys's opening move with uncanny agility. Hard years spent dodging hunters and living on the periphery had sharpened her reflexes to a razor's edge. The timid outcast was gone, replaced by a brewing tempest. "You presume to seize what is not yours to claim." Her voice, amplified by the forest's essence, boomed across the clearing, silencing the panicked cries of Rhys's followers. "This pack has endured enough loss. I will not permit further bloodshed." A raspy bark escaped Rhys's throat, mocking and cruel. "You, a rejected mate? You are nothing more than a blemish upon their lineage." He launched himself anew, aiming for her jugular. Ilara stood firm, unflinching. She deflected his strike with a speed that astonished even her. The Blackwood's magic coursed like liquid fire, heightening her awareness, bolstering her strength. She felt the lethal potential of her claws, the pent-up energy in her limbs, the fierce compulsion to safeguard the remnants of her pack. Her counterattack was a maelstrom of fangs and fury. Stunned by her sudden intensity, Rhys staggered backward. Ilara relentlessly pursued him, driving him toward the clearing's edge, a flurry of calculated movements. She fainted, a phantom blur, and he roared, choked with frustration and rage. "I will break your spirit, witch! You will beg for the sweet release of oblivion." "Mercy?" The word was a venomous expulsion. "You know no mercy. You came seeking conquest, destruction, theft. I offer you the justice you deserve." She unleashed the full might of the Blackwood. A palpable darkness swirled around her, crackling with untamed energy. Her eyes ignited with inner fire, and from her throat issued a savage roar that quivered the very earth. Fear flickered in Rhys's gaze as he recognized the raw, primal power emanating from her, the ancient magic humming in her blood. He had underestimated her, and now his arrogance would be his undoing. Ilara struck with a force that shattered his defenses, sending him hurtling through the air. He slammed into a gnarled oak, the impact vibrating through the soil. He lay there, dazed and bleeding, feebly attempting to rise. She loomed over him, casting a long, ominous shadow. "Leave," she commanded, her voice infused with the Blackwood's authority. "Take your pack and vanish. Should you return, I will hunt you to the ends of the earth and make you regret the day you drew breath." Fear mingled with seething hate in Rhys's eyes. He knew defeat. He understood he could not prevail. With a pained groan, he struggled to his feet and signaled his pack. They scattered into the forest's embrace, leaving their fallen leader to his fate. Ilara watched their departure, her heart laden with the implications of her actions. She had Markra, protected her pack, but the cost was steep. Torin was gone, and division festered, born of apprehension and mistrust. Turning, she faced her remaining pack members, her gaze sweeping across weary faces. Bram appeared frail, sheltered by Kale's protective stance and unwavering loyalty. Lyra, her eyes wide with uncertainty, stood near Sarah, her expression a mixture of emotions. Ilara realized that words alone would not suffice. She needed to demonstrate her worthiness, to prove she could guide them toward a brighter future. Raising her head, she unleashed a long, mournful howl that echoed through the Blackwood, a lament for the fallen and a pledge for those who remained. The lament faded into silence, broken only by the rustle of leaves and avian melodies. Ilara faced her pack, determination burning in her gaze. "We have suffered greatly," she stated, her voice clear and resonant. "We have endured loss. But we will not be vanquished. We will rebuild, creating a new society founded on the bedrock of equality, empathy, and mutual respect. Her attention shifted to Bram and Kale. Bram, your wisdom and erudition are indispensable. You will be my advisor, guiding me with your experience. She then focused on Kale. Kale, your steadfast devotion and strength are unwavering. You will be my second, assisting in enforcing regulations and safeguarding the pack. Turning to Lyra, her expression softened. Lyra, your idealism is a treasure. Never allow its flame to be extinguished. You will champion the young, ensuring their voices are acknowledged. Finally, her gaze landed on Sarah. She detected the simmering resentment, the burning ambition smoldering beneath the surface. Ilara knew Sarah would present a challenge, but she was undaunted. Sarah, she began, her tone even. Your strength and tactical acumen are undeniable. You will oversee the training of our warriors, ensuring they are prepared to defend our territory. Sarah's eyes narrowed, recognizing the implicit challenge in Ilara's words, the veiled warning. She offered a slight bow, concealing her seething displeasure. As you command, Alpha. Ignoring the barely concealed sarcasm, Ilara focused on more pressing matters. From this day forward, she declared, her voice filled with authority, the archaic system of alphas and betas is abolished. We are equal members of this pack, each possessing a voice in shaping our destiny. She paused, allowing her declaration to resonate. We will establish a new code, one that protects the vulnerable, punishes the cruel, and champions justice and fairness. We will welcome those in need and provide sanctuary to the lost. We will honor the memory of those who have fallen by forging a society worthy of their sacrifice, ushering in a new era of hope and compassion. Her words stirred a flicker of optimism within the weariness of the pack. They watched Ilara with newfound respect, their eyes reflecting a blend of awe and gratitude. Lyra approached, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I believe in you, Ilara, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I believe you can lead us to a brighter horizon. Bram nodded, his gaze filled with wisdom. You possess the fortitude and empathy to guide us through these darkest of times. I will stand unwavering at your side. Kale stepped forward and knelt, his eyes fixed on Ilara with unyielding loyalty. I am yours to command, Alpha. I will serve you with every fiber of my being. Even Sarah, though her countenance remained guarded, could not deny the weight of Ilara's words. The pack was transforming, entering a new epoch, and she would have to adapt, whether she desired it or not. Ilara surveyed her pack, her heart swelling with hope. The road ahead was fraught with peril, but she was undeterred. She possessed the strength of the Blackwood and the support of her pack. Together, they would confront any challenge and forge a new dawn where the pack could finally find peace and prosperity. Raising her head skyward, she released another howl, one brimming with hope and resolve. The sound reverberated through the Blackwood, a promise of a better tomorrow, a testament to the endurance of the pack, a proclamation of a new era. A new dawn had broken,